I know how this sounds. A man crying over a woman who moved on too fast, too easily. Believe me, I wish this wasn't the story I'm about to tell. I wish I had a cooler beginning. Something dramatic like catching her in the act or yelling at a hotel door while rain poured over my stupid blazer. But it wasn't like that. It started with a box of oranges. We were unloading groceries one Thursday afternoon, and she laughed. Not at me, just out of nowhere. That kind of private laugh that makes you feel like you've missed the joke. I asked her what was funny, and she said, "Nothing. I was just thinking about something Jules said." Jules. Before that week, I thought Jules was just someone she worked with at the nonprofit. She always said his name like it was a punchline. "Oh, Jules again. You know how he is." I didn't know how he was. I didn't even know what he looked like. That box of oranges rolled onto the floor, and she didn't stop smiling as she picked them up. That was when the first crack showed. A smile she didn't offer to me anymore. My name's Halden, by the way. Halden. I teach middle school science in a tiny district in Pennsylvania. I'm the kind of guy who wears the same pair of brown shoes until the soles flap, and the kind of husband who still prints little notes and slips them in packed lunches, even if they're never mentioned afterward. I guess I thought that made me secure. But that week, everything shifted. She started dressing differently for work, staying late more often, and slowly, she stopped mentioning Jules altogether, which told me everything I needed to know. I didn't explode. I didn't demand answers. Instead, I folded. That's my thing. I fold. I internalize. I tell myself she's just tired. Or maybe I'm just insecure. Or maybe people in love are supposed to grow apart and then back together again. Right? But here's the thing no one tells you. When a betrayal is slow, it's worse because it gives you time to doubt yourself all the way through it. One night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. But a chat window blinked open on its own. A message from Jules. "Last night still has me smiling. You're unreal." That was the moment. Not the message. Not even the implication. But the fact that she never, in all our years, had said anything like that to me. Not even back when we were younger, and everything felt like warm syrup and shared playlists. And she had told him. I closed the laptop, sat at the kitchen table, just sat for 2 hours. She came home, kissed my head, microwaved her leftover stir-fry, and told me how exhausted she was. I didn't say a word. I should have. I know that now. But silence is my defense mechanism. Silence makes it easier to pretend you're okay. The days after were worse. I noticed more. The lipstick she never wore for me. The nervous giggle when Jules texted during dinner. The way she positioned her phone face down every single time she left the room. So I did something I hate myself for. I RSVP'd to the annual donor gala. She'd begged me to skip the past 2 years. I wanted to see him. I wanted to see her with him. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I could put a face to it, I'd finally feel something other than numb. I rented a suit that didn't fit. My tie was wrinkled. I showed up late, walked past chandeliers and champagne and the kind of people who say network like a verb. And there she was, Clarabelle, in a navy gown with Jules beside her. He touched her back the way I used to. She leaned into it. I wasn't supposed to see that. She wasn't supposed to look up and find me standing there with shaky hands and too much sweat behind my ears. But she did. Her smile dropped. She stepped away from him and walked toward me, reached out like none of it had happened, like I was supposed to be grateful for the gesture. But I didn't take her hand. I just looked at her and said softly but clearly, "Not this time. Not again." Then I left. And now I'm here, outside in my car with a wrinkled tie and a heart that won't stop folding in on itself. I don't know how long I sat in that car after walking out of the gala. Time became irrelevant, just a concept floating somewhere outside the fogged windows. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just existed like a static figure in a paused video trying to understand where exactly things had shifted so far off course. The irony is, if you asked Clarabelle to describe our relationship in public, she'd probably still say it was safe. That's the word she always used, safe. Like I was some kind of shelter from the chaos of her world. I was dependable, calm, warm, a blanket. And maybe that was the problem. Blankets aren't exciting. They don't surprise you. They don't make you feel butterflies or adrenaline or whatever Jules made her feel with his overconfident smirk and just out of bed charm. The next morning, she texted me, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. I spent most of that day wandering through the tiny wooded trail behind our neighborhood, the one where we used to walk after dinner, where she once told me she wanted kids someday, maybe two. I remember she paused at a bench and pointed to a patch of wildflowers and said, "Wouldn't it be nice to have picnics here with little ones?" We never had children. Not because I didn't want them, but because she kept saying, "Let's wait until things settle." Then she'd change jobs. Then she'd want to travel. Then she said, "Maybe I'm just not the type." But maybe she was just waiting to see if someone else was. She came home that night around 9 o'clock. I was in the living room pretending to read, though I hadn't turned a page in half an hour. She came in quietly, like she was walking on sacred ground. No perfume, no heels, just her, barefoot in a sweater I hadn't seen in years. "Halden," she said, and I noticed she didn't call me Hal. That was always her nickname for me, short and sweet. But now she used the full name like I was a stranger she had to reintroduce herself to. "I know what you saw," she continued, and her voice cracked just slightly. "It's not what it looks like." That line. I wanted to laugh. Honestly, I really did. But instead, I said something I didn't plan. Something that even surprised me. "I don't think you even know what it is anymore." She looked stunned. Not because I was being harsh, I wasn't, but because I had never spoken to her like that. I'd always been the one to apologize first, to give her room, to turn every conflict into a monologue of self-blame. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, sitting down on the edge of the couch like the cushions were made of broken glass. "Jules and we were friends, I swear. But I think I got confused. You've been so distant, and He listened. He made me feel seen again. That part hurt because she wasn't wrong. I had pulled away slowly, cautiously, the way a hand withdraws from a hot stove, even when it wants to linger. But not because I didn't care. I was just afraid. Afraid that if I leaned in too close, I'd notice the love had changed shape or, worse, disappeared entirely. I asked her something simple. "Did you sleep with him?" She didn't answer right away. That pause was enough, but eventually, she gave a soft nod, as if she were confessing a small sin, like stealing a cookie. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I stood anyway. "You don't get to reach for me when you've already reached for someone else," I said quietly. "You had choices. You chose silence. You chose secrets. You chose someone else's hand when mine was still open." She began to cry, and for the first time in years I didn't move toward her. I didn't hug her. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. I went upstairs, closed the door, locked it. That night, I slept on top of the covers, fully dressed, because I didn't want to feel the sheets we used to share. I stared at the ceiling for hours, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I was afraid to. I didn't want to dream about her. I didn't want to see her laughing or kissing me or asking what's for breakfast. I wanted to forget, but the worst part was knowing that I couldn't. Not yet. I woke up to silence. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the kind that hums in your chest like an unanswered question. The room still smelled like her shampoo, a faint trail of coconut and vanilla. I hated that I noticed. I hated that I missed it. Downstairs, I heard the soft shuffle of Clarabelle moving around. No clinking dishes, no cheerful humming, just the quietness of someone who knows they've lost something but still doesn't understand how deep the damage runs. I didn't go down right away. I stayed in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it spun aimlessly, just like my thoughts. Eventually, I forced myself up. My body ached, though I hadn't done anything. Grief, I've learned, has weight, and mine settled in my shoulders like wet concrete. She had made coffee, of course she did. That's how she coped with routines. Everything always looked normal when it was falling apart. A full pot of coffee didn't mean she wasn't sleeping with another man. Clean countertops didn't mean the lies had stopped. I poured myself a cup, mostly out of habit. Clarabelle was sitting at the table, still in that old sweater. She looked smaller somehow, like someone had turned the volume down on her presence. "Halden," she started. But I cut her off. Not with anger, just exhaustion. I don't want to talk. Not yet. She nodded, and for once, she listened. The day passed in a strange sort of limbo. I graded science quizzes while my wife, my cheating wife, answered emails in the next room. We were coexisting, but everything had shifted. Every sound she made felt intrusive. Every step she took down the hallway reminded me of how many steps she had taken towards someone else. I started to think back not just to Jules but to the months before, and suddenly all the little things that hadn't made sense started to line up like puzzle pieces. The necklace I never bought her, but she wore on weekends. The way she rushed to turn off her phone when I walked in. That weird day when her coworker, Ellie, called and accidentally asked how the two of them were doing. I thought she meant us. I see now that she didn't. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was layered, woven into months of small choices, lies disguised as forgetfulness, touches that were missing even when she was in the room. That evening, she came to the door of my study and leaned against the frame. "I want to be honest with you," she said. "I owe you that." Took everything in me not to snap back. "You owed me that a year ago." Instead, I nodded. "I met Jules at the summer retreat. First, it was nothing. Just inside jokes, late-night emails. But I started talking to him about things I used to only talk to you about. He made me feel new, not judged, not married. I know that sounds terrible. It did, but I let her keep going. He told me he didn't care that I was married. He said maybe I was married to the wrong person." I swallowed hard. That line, it hit like a cold slap because I had thought that too once, but I never said it out loud. I stayed. I tried. I forgave before I even had anything to forgive. I didn't plan for anything to happen. It just did. And then I didn't know how to stop. That part one believed. I really did. Not because I wanted to excuse her, but because I knew her. She was the kind of person who didn't know how to say no to attention. She thrived in admiration but wilted under responsibility. I used to protect her from that. Now I was just a casualty of it. When she finished, I asked the question I'd been holding in my chest all day. "Do you love him?" She hesitated, looked down. Then, "No. But I loved what he made me feel." That answered everything and nothing. That night, she slept in the guest room. I stayed in our bedroom, wide awake, staring at the ceiling again. My mind kept replaying the way she looked at me across the gala, reaching out, expecting something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe weakness. And all I could think was, I've spent so many years being the man who says yes when he wants to say please don't. This time I finally said no. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Because even a soft heart has a limit. A few days passed. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a museum of our marriage. Everything still in place but hollow. We moved like shadows through it, exchanging short phrases, pretending civility. I would ask if she needed the car. She'd ask if I wanted her to pick up eggs. These little performances made us feel like less of a disaster than we were. One morning, she wasn't in the kitchen. Normally, even during our Cold War, she'd still make coffee, her ritual, her routine. But that morning, the machine sat untouched. I walked past the counter and found a small yellow note in her handwriting. "Gone for a walk. I'll be back. Please don't worry." She always used notes when she didn't want to talk. In our early days, they were sweet little drawings in the margins. "I miss you already." Or, "You looked cute in your sleep." Now they just felt like walls. I crumpled the paper, not out of anger, but because I couldn't stand the way it pretended to be normal. I needed air too. So I took the car and just drove. No destination, just miles. The kind of drive where your thoughts get loud and your chest gets tight. Somewhere near the state line, I stopped at a greasy diner, ordered coffee I didn't want, and stared out the window like I was waiting for the universe to send a message. Instead, I got a call from Ellie, Clarabelle's coworker. First, I let it ring. I didn't want to talk to anyone connected to her, but something made me answer. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I was hoping someone else would finally be honest with me. "Hey, Halden, I shouldn't be calling, but I need to say something," Ellie began. Her voice was tight, anxious. I braced myself. She told you about Jules, right? She asked. Yeah, I said quietly. Ellie sighed. I figured. But Halden, Jules wasn't the beginning. My heart skipped. What do you mean? There was a long pause. Then she said something that broke whatever was left of the illusion I had been trying to preserve. There was someone else. A few years ago, during the big grant trip in Austin. You remember? Clarabelle told you it was boring, all seminars. She met someone there, a guy from another organization. I thought it was just flirting. But when she came back, she was different. I felt the blood leave my face. I don't know all the details, Ellie went on. She shut me out after I asked, but I know they kept texting for months. She used a second email. I only saw it once by accident. She called it a phase. But Halden, I think she's been trying to feel something outside your marriage for a while now. I hung up shortly after that. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there staring at my reflection in the diner window. A man who never wanted to see the truth, now choking on all of it at once. When I got home that night, she was on the couch, curled up like a kid who'd been caught sneaking candy. She looked up. Where were you? Out, I said. Just out. She stared at me for a moment, like she wanted to ask more, but didn't. And maybe she knew. Maybe she felt it. The wall finally going up on my side, not hers. For years, I'd been the one begging for scraps of attention, begging her to talk, to explain, to let me in. But now I was done knocking. I talked to Ellie, I said flatly. She froze. She told me about Austin. Clarabelle's mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. No denial, no defense, just that expression. The one where someone realizes the dam has finally broken. I should have told you, she whispered. You should have told me everything, I said. But you were never going to, were you? She shook her head slowly, eyes glistening. No. And somehow that was the most honest thing she'd said to me in months. I didn't scream. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't threaten to leave. I just walked upstairs, sat on the bed, and looked at the photo on the dresser. The one from our trip to Maine 5 years ago. We were sitting on a dock, her legs in my lap, both laughing like kids. I wondered if she had already been gone then. If the woman in that picture had already started slipping away. Or maybe I had. Maybe we both had, but only one of us had betrayed the other. The house was too quiet after that night. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that feels earned. No, this was the kind of silence that clung to your skin. Every room felt colder, even when the heat was on. Clarabelle and I barely spoke. She didn't try to deny anything anymore. She'd said her truth, or at least the version of it she was willing to admit to, and I'd said nothing back. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because everything I wanted to say had been buried under the weight of years she never let me see. I started sleeping in the guest room. She didn't protest. I think we both knew that if we tried to keep playing house, we'd only end up resenting each other more than we already did. The mattress was stiff. The pillow smelled like closet air. And the bedside lamp flickered when it was on too long. Still, it was the only space that felt like mine now. And slowly, something shifted inside me. Not rage, not even heartbreak anymore. It was a strange kind of clarity, like watching a bridge burn from across the river and realizing you don't actually want to rebuild it. You just want to get in your car and drive somewhere new. So I started preparing for the end. Not dramatically, not with slammed doors or ultimatums. Quietly, like everything else I do. I opened a private bank account, got a P.O. box, looked up listings for small rental cabins upstate, just enough space for one person and a dog if I ever got one. I didn't know if I was really going to leave yet, but for the first time in a long while, I needed to know that I could. One afternoon, while she was at work, I pulled my old suitcase from the back of the closet. It still had the baggage tag from our 10th anniversary trip to Asheville. I almost smiled at the memory of us dancing barefoot in the cabin kitchen, drunk on boxed wine and feeling 20 years younger. Then I remembered how that same night, she stepped outside for air and stayed gone for almost an hour. She said she just needed space. And I, being the fool I was, told her, "Take all the time you need." As I packed a few clothes, I found the box. It was one of those decorative shoebox-style containers she used to collect old letters and postcards. I don't know what made me open it. Maybe I just needed to see if anything in this house still belonged to me emotionally. Inside were letters from her sister, some dried flowers from our wedding bouquet, and buried at the bottom a printed photo. Not a photo of us, a photo of her with someone I didn't recognize. It wasn't Jules. It wasn't anyone from her nonprofit job either, at least not anyone I'd ever seen. They were at some rooftop bar. Her head rested on his shoulder, both of them lit by sunset like it had been staged for a magazine spread. His arm was wrapped around her waist, fingers laced into the fabric of her dress like he belonged there. Written on the back in her handwriting, Boston, August. First time I said it out loud. I sat down, the suitcase half-zipped behind me, and just stared at the words. First time I said it out loud. Said what? It didn't matter. I knew. I love you. That's what she said. Not to me. Not in August and not in Boston. I don't know who the man in the photo was. It almost didn't matter. What mattered was that there had been a first. Jules wasn't that. Jules wasn't even second. She had been saying, I love you to other people while still sharing a bed with me. And now it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the depth of the lie I'd been living in, the years I had built a life with someone who had secretly been auditioning replacements, and not just once. I placed the photo back in the box, closed the lid, sat there in the guest room, the light from the window slanting across the carpet, and finally said the thing I hadn't dared admit out loud. I don't love her anymore, and it didn't hurt to say. That scared me more than anything else. That night, she came home to find her side of the closet missing a few shirts. The framed photo on the nightstand was gone. My slippers weren't by the bed. She walked past the guest room, peeked in, and saw me sitting at the desk, typing. She didn't say anything, and I think in that moment she finally understood. I was already halfway gone. I thought the silence between us had finally settled into something permanent, like old wallpaper you stop noticing. But it turns out even silence can be manipulated, and Clarabelle knew how to use it like a scalpel. It was a Wednesday evening, overcast, the kind of gray sky that makes you feel like you're underwater. I had just gotten off a video call with a realtor about a small rental north of the city, a one-bedroom with creaky floors, bad cell signal, and a fireplace I didn't trust. But it had something our house didn't anymore. Peace. I was halfway through organizing files into a thumb drive when she knocked on the door frame. Not a full knock, just the back of her knuckle grazing the wood. Can we talk? She asked, barely audible. I didn't answer right away. I motioned to the chair across from me. She sat, legs crossed, hands gripping each other like she didn't trust them to stay still. I expected more apologies, more layered, half-honest confessions. But that wasn't what she came for. I need your help, she said. That threw me. Help. Now. She looked nervous. There's a donor dinner this Friday, a big one. Private venue. My director asked if I'd bring someone, make a good impression, and I thought maybe you'd go with me. Just for show. I blinked. You want me to pretend we're fine? Not fine, she said quickly. Just functional. Like we're still a team. You don't have to do anything. Just smile, shake hands. You're good at that. I wanted to laugh, but all that came out was a dry, hollow exhale. The audacity, the way she could shift the narrative so cleanly, like the last few weeks hadn't happened, like we were still something she could dress up and take out to impress donors. I'm not your prop, I said. I know. I'm sorry, she replied. But it was too rehearsed, too automatic. But this dinner, it's huge. They're considering doubling our funding, and if I show up alone after everything, people will talk. That was it. Not regret, not reconciliation, just damage control. You want me to help protect your image? I said flatly. She didn't deny it. That told me everything. For a moment, I wanted to say yes, just to see what pretending would feel like. I imagined us walking into that room, her arm linked in mine, both of us acting like the last 10 years hadn't slowly decayed into betrayal and disillusionment. Maybe some part of me wanted to see if she could still fake affection. Maybe some smaller part of me wanted to see if I could. But I didn't agree. I just stared at her. And that's when she said something I'll never forget. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just thought maybe we could be allies for one night." Allies. Not lovers, not partners, just allies. Like we were soldiers from different wars, shaking hands at a ceasefire neither of us believed in. I stood up. She followed suit. "You had 1,000 nights to be an ally to me, Clarabelle," I said, voice low. "And now you want a performance." She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked out of the room, out of the house, into the foggy air that tasted like rain. I didn't take the car. I walked aimlessly around the neighborhood until the streetlights flicked on and the sky turned to charcoal. When I came back, she was in the kitchen, still in her dress pants and blouse, an untouched wine glass in hand. "Halden," she started, but I interrupted her gently. "I'll go." She blinked. "You will." "I'll go to your dinner," I clarified. "But afterward, I'm done pretending. That'll be my last performance." Her face tensed like she was holding back a wince. "I understand." But I knew she didn't. She thought I was bluffing, that I'd go and get swept up in old habits, that I'd hear her laugh with a table full of smiling strangers and remember why I fell in love in the first place. And maybe that was her gamble, that nostalgia could override reality. But what she didn't understand was this. I hadn't stopped loving her because of one night. I stopped because of all the nights she chose everyone else over me and still came home like nothing had shifted, like I was too soft to notice. And maybe I was, but not anymore. Friday arrived like a weight. The day dragged with a sort of quiet dread, as if even the air in the house knew we were stepping into the final act. Clarabelle spent the morning steaming her dress, curling her hair, and carefully applying makeup in the same mirror where I used to catch her grinning while brushing her teeth. Back when life was less orchestrated and more real. I didn't ask who else would be there. I didn't ask if Jules would show up or if the mystery man from the rooftop photo would be circling in some corner of that venue, sipping red wine and watching her parade me around like a relic from a past life. It didn't matter. This wasn't for me. It never was. I wore my one decent suit, the gray one she bought me for my brother's wedding 5 years ago. It still fit, though it felt heavier now, like the threads remembered who we used to be. The venue was a renovated conservatory, the kind with glass walls, soft piano music, and a chandelier that looked like it cost more than our mortgage. The second we walked in, her posture shifted. Her hand slipped around my arm, not tightly, but with the exact amount of pressure required to suggest intimacy without commitment. She greeted everyone with ease. She was magnetic, poised, impressive. And I realized something. She was exactly who she wanted to be, just not with me. People approached us in waves. She introduced me as my husband, Halden, with a brightness that felt entirely performative, and I played along. I shook hands, smiled at strangers, nodded when appropriate. I said all the right things. I was the dependable spouse she'd always advertised to the world. Quiet, steady, inoffensive. And the whole time I watched her, not with longing, not with jealousy, just with clarity. She belonged in this world, this curated, polished room of polished people saying polished things. Her laughter was louder than it used to be. Her glances quicker. Her charm turned up like a dial. She was selling something, maybe herself, maybe a dream. But whatever it wasn't for me. Halfway through the evening, she leaned in close, her breath grazing my cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. I turned to her slowly. "For what?" "For being here. For showing up. I know things have been complicated." Complicated. That word again. As if what she did was a scheduling conflict. I nodded once, not trusting myself to say more. But then she said something else. Something that caught me completely off guard. "Do you think we could talk? Really talk? After this?" I looked at her, searching for signs of sincerity, of remorse, of something human. But all I saw was that same expression I'd seen in the mirror too many times. A person trying not to feel what they should have felt a long time ago. "I don't know if there's anything left to talk about," I said carefully. She blinked, surprised, maybe even hurt, but she didn't argue. We sat down for dinner. Candlelight flickered across linen napkins, and speeches filled the room. I tuned most of it out until I heard my name. Clarabelle was standing at the podium thanking the foundation, the donors, her colleagues, and then she said, "And lastly, I want to thank my husband, Halden, for being my rock through everything. I wouldn't be the woman I am today without him." The crowd clapped. I froze. I wouldn't be the woman I am today without him. I don't think she realized what that sounded like. Or maybe she did. Because the woman she had become, the one who lied, who cheated, who manipulated emotion like a tool, wasn't someone I wanted credit for. She had changed, grown, maybe evolved in some way, but not into someone I could recognize, not into someone I wanted to keep remembering. After the applause died down, she returned to the table, flushed from the spotlight. She reached for my hand, and for a moment, I let her touch it, just long enough to feel how foreign it had become. Then I pulled away. Not harshly, not dramatically, just quietly. She looked at me, confused. And that's when I leaned in and said, with the calmest voice I've ever used, "This will be the last time you use me to make yourself look whole." She said nothing. We left shortly after. The car ride was silent, save for the turn signals and the hum of tires against wet pavement. When we got home, she stepped out first. I waited, watching her walk up the porch steps like she had a dozen times before. But this time, I didn't follow. I backed out of the driveway and kept driving. Not fast, not recklessly, just forward. And for the first time in years, I didn't look back. I didn't leave that night with a suitcase. I didn't pack boxes or slam doors. I left with only what I needed. My dignity, my breath, and the quiet realization that walking away didn't mean failure. It meant freedom. I drove north. No GPS, no music, just the soft sound of rain on the windshield and the steady rhythm of my heart finally finding its own pace. Somewhere past midnight, I pulled off near a state park I used to visit in college. Slept in the car with the seat reclined and the windows cracked just enough to let the cold remind me I was alive. The next morning, I bought coffee from a roadside diner where no one knew my name. I sat near the window watching the sun rise over the trees. And for the first time in years, I felt light. I felt like me, not someone's husband, not someone's second choice, just Halden. Quiet man. A soft man. A man who'd lost more than he thought he could bear and was still standing. I ended up renting that small cabin I'd found earlier. The one with the uneven floors and terrible cell signal. It's tucked between pine trees and far enough from town that the silence feels like a warm coat, not a punishment. I wake up early. I walk the trails behind the house. I read more. I cook simple meals. I let myself feel things without rushing to fix them. Clarabelle reached out a few times. A polite text at first, then a longer email. She said she understood now. Said she was getting therapy, that she wanted me to know she never stopped appreciating me, even if she hadn't known how to show it. She hoped one day I could forgive her. I haven't responded, not because I hate her. I don't. But because I finally realized that forgiveness doesn't require conversation. Sometimes it's a quiet, private act, something you do for your own soul, not theirs. And I have forgiven her. I've forgiven myself, too, for staying too long, for loving too hard, for believing that being dependable would keep someone from drifting. A few weeks ago, I adopted a dog. Her name's Willow. She's small, clumsy, a rescue. When she runs through the yard chasing leaves, I laugh. Actually, laugh in a way I hadn't since maybe our second year of marriage. That unfiltered kind of joy that doesn't ask permission. The other day, I took Willow down to the lake and let her splash around while I sat on the dock with a notebook. I wrote something down, a single sentence that felt like a declaration, a promise, a truth. She reached out to me at the gala, but I said, "Not this time, not again." And that was the moment I saved myself. It wasn't the ending I imagined all those years ago when I said, "I do," but maybe, just maybe, it's the beginning I actually needed.